Thank you, Andrew, for those kind words. And good morning, everyone, and welcome to Live 360. Thank you so much for sort of waking up early in the morning and sort of dropping in over here for this keynote. As Andrew was saying, so sort of I'm a developer at heart, and sort of over all these years in the products that I've worked in, sort of my focus has been how to sort of simplify the stack so that developers can take advantage of it. And besides these products, I've sort of worked a lot in the .NET framework / Visual Studio space. So if you've sort of done file new project in Visual Studio for any web application, then you can sort of blame me or you can love me. But these are the experiences I kind of sort of go after. And the whole idea is if you're not successful on day 1, that you will never be successful on day 30 or day 90. And this particular keynote was very interesting for me because it sort of blends in the two worlds of data and AI. And sort of we have this, Andrew and I did sort of a webcast as well on it's like, who's the master? Is data the master or is AI the master? And it turns out like nobody is the master over here. It's just one is serving the other. And you cannot have one without the other. And given that sort of I am a developer at heart, I'm going to sort of try to sort of showcase some of the things Microsoft is innovating on from a developer perspective, and sort of how can you start infusing AI into your applications. I'm going to cover sort of a broad spectrum of products, and these products are going to be targeting all kinds of developers. It doesn't matter if you are a data developer or you're a full stack developer, you're front end, you're back end, you're a client side, you're web, you are a data scientist, you're not a data scientist, you're a techie guy, you're not a techie person, you are a business analyst. So AI is sort of for everyone, and my goal over here is to sort of showcase some of the ways we are trying to make AI accessible to all kinds of developers. And my hope is after this talk, sort of you'll walk away with these big rocks to look into as you go around and sort of attend all these sessions in this conference itself. So Microsoft's vision on AI is very simple. It's all about empowerment. We want to empower developers so that they can sort of go viral with their applications and infuse AI throughout their applications. We want to make sure we empower organizations so that they can transform their businesses. And we also want to empower people to sort of use AI to transform society. And we'll sort of deep dive into each one of those areas as we go through this talk. So let's see what it means to sort of empower organizations to use AI. What Gartner predicts is by 2020, 85% of the enterprises will be using AI. And 25% of them have already started dabbling in AI, but they're not very successful. There are 3 key factors that sort of block progress on AI. The first is this chaotic data estate, which is data is coming from a lot of different sources. Historically, we were all building sort of forms over data applications, and now we are sort of combining that with data coming from logs to sort of figure out how users are interacting with the system. There's streaming data coming in, there's data being generated from devices. So data is everywhere, and you have all these little data silos, which are sort of hard to combine together and make progress. And even though the promise of AI is very real, there is lack of skill sets and productivity tool sets available for a developer or a sort of a non-data scientist to be productive. The AI knowledge is limited to very few, and these resources are scarce to sort of get. And then lastly, given that the AI sort of or machine learning space is still evolving from a technology perspective, it's still slightly immature in terms of the enterprise adoption. So things like how do you deploy your models safely? How do you sort of protect your models? How do you define your virtual network boundaries? And so on and so forth. So from an IT perspective, how do you make sure that you can sort of deploy these models in a secure and reliable way? And then from a data perspective, like there are sort of these 4 key elements of a digital transformation that a company sort of goes through. It's all sort of revolves around employees, customers, products, and operations. So let's see how can you invest in each of these 4 areas. So the feedback loop starts with customers sort of interacting with your product. employees trying to sort of building the product, and they use the telemetry that they've put in the product to understand how customers are using the product, and they sort of then use all of this data to streamline their operations model so that they can provide the best experience to customers. So this is a very typical problem that all organizations sort of will have. The second part to this process is around insights. So once you've sort of started gathering data from all these different sources, then how do you connect and synthesize this data? So there's a lot of these factors that go into it around how do you do data prep? How do you sort of combine data from all these various sources? And the third part about is around action. Now that you have the data, so you've done the hard job of breaking your data silos and sort of coming up with the data lake. And the next thing comes around, how do you sort of bring in actionable insights? Like what kind of skill sets do you sort of need to make that possible? And a few examples of customers who have done it around the spectrum are the following. There is eSmart, who's a Norway-based company, who've sort of empowered employee to do detection more effectively. There is ASOS, who is an online retailer in Europe, who has sort of modernized their data estate to include machine learning to provide an enhanced user experience to their end customers. There is Walmart, who have used sort of machine learning to optimize operations to make sure that the product that you're searching for is available on the web, the product that you're searching for in the actual store is available, so there is inventory management being done. And then DocuSign has been transforming products by sort of putting in rich telemetry and being able to sort of explore that telemetry in real time as customers are interacting with their product. So it's a very complicated sort of loop in terms of the interactivity model and the data coming in. And what you sort of need over here is infrastructure that you can sort of rely on, and sort of that's where we come in from a Microsoft perspective. Your data estate today sort of spans different dimensions. Mostly, you have a lot of data assets which are sitting on-prem. And then we'll look at sort of how do you build or start thinking about this hybrid data estate where you can start modernizing all of these stacks together. And there is no sort of one solution fits all, but these are tool sets available for you to use. So we'll look at what investments are we making on-prem. We'll look at what are some of the key services we've launched to modernize your applications, to build cloud-native applications. And once you have the data, how do you unlock AI, or how do you unlock insights from your data? And then combining all of this, there are tools available which I'll talk about in terms of how do you infuse AI across all these applications. So if you think about modernizing on-prem, like SQL Server has been sort of our flagship database server, which has been sort of loved and used by all of you here. And the historical track record is very good, that we've been releasing new version of SQL Server, and we've been innovating in the SQL Server engine itself to make sure that the key features around always on is available. There's in-memory OLTP. We introduced machine learning as part of SQL Server, so you can run, you can score using R. And then in 2017, we also made SQL Server cross-platform, so you can run it on Linux and containers. What we have coming up next as part of SQL Server 2019 is the capability that we have around deploying SQL Server on anywhere. So you can sort of deploy it on Windows, you can deploy it on Linux, you can deploy it in containers. And then what we're doing over here is to try to break down the silos that we've sort of, that have been created, because data is coming in from various sources and there are different personas tackling the data in different ways. You have the relational database stack, and then you have the big data stack that is sort of coming up in parallel. So what we have tried to do in SQL Server 2019 is you can run Spark in your SQL cluster, and you can access data which is stored in HDFS. So you can imagine experiences where now you have a single cluster or a single experience where you can write SQL queries using your SQL language, or if you know sort of Python and you're starting to learn data science as well, there is integrated notebook experience. So you can write Python code, you can write Spark, you can leverage the sort of feature set of Spark to do batch streaming or interactive explorations, and you can do sort of machine learning as well. And the data at the end of the day is either stored in SQL Server, or the data can be stored in HDFS. And from within a single tool, you can sort of explore data stored in both these locations. You no longer have to move the data from one system to the other. And if anybody has done big data, like moving data at a terabyte or petabyte scale is not fun. Like data prep is not fun. Things break all the time, and it's hard because these are BI pipelines running. So with SQL 2019, what we're trying to do over here is we're trying to enable intelligence over all of your data. It's about integrating all your data sources, so you can query from a single interface to data which is stored in SQL, which is data which is stored in Hadoop. And then you can manage all the data together. You can have authorization policies that define which user has access to what table. You can have authorization policies define also which user has access to what files. You can define policies in terms of what user can run what sort of queries on the system as well. And all of the data behind the scenes can be masked, can be encrypted. So it has all these SQL Server benefits. And then once you've sort of combined these two worlds of a SQL and sort of big data, then you can leverage the sort of the modern tool sets that Spark has to offer in terms of notebooks to write Python code or sort of Scala code to sort of do machine learning in your environment itself. And then from a platform perspective, both sort of SQL and big data are sitting on the reliability and the mission critical performance that SQL Server gives out of the box. So you get high performance, you get high security in terms of data is encrypted by default, and you can even do data masking. And then it's highly available given the architecture of SQL Server. From a tooling perspective, from a database admin or sort of a SQL developer perspective, we have extended the data tools to call it Azure Data Studio. And historically, what this tool set used to come was with a SQL interface where you can write SQL queries and you can sort of view the result in a sort of in a grid. But now we have sort of enhanced this tool set to also include a Jupyter notebook that you can sort of go and write Spark queries against the SQL Server tables, or you can do vice versa as well. And then these two, the notebook comes with a rich sort of UI palette, so you can do charting, you can do graphs, and exploration of data now becomes a lot more simpler with this addition. It also sort of simplifies deployment of these clusters, so you can deploy SQL Server, you can also deploy Spark, and you can sort of manage it within the same environment. So from a DBA perspective, this tool sort of gives them a good single tool to sort of manage both the SQL world and the sort of big data world together and start breaking down the data silos. The second part about modernizing your data estate is about modernizing to the cloud. And the first sort of set of services we have in this space is around relational database services. So we've had SQL Server that you could sort of run on-prem, and then we also had Azure SQL DB. But given that open source is popular and sort of developers make choices based on what their favorite open source project is, we've also enabled other relational engines to run in the cloud. And so you can run Postgres, you can run MySQL, you can use MariaDB. And all of these data services sort of are backed up by the data platform. So they're intelligent, they have protection, they're performance, they're flexible, so you can scale, you can lastly scale compute up and down, and they're trusted as well. So they have HA built in, they have DR built in, they have encryption built in. So our goal over here is to make sure that you can sort of run these open source engines easily inside your applications, while the platform will take care of the heavy lifting of making sure that you can run these reliably at scale in the cloud. We've also introduced Azure SQL Database Managed Instance, and this is a service which sort of makes it very easy to move to the cloud. It's SQL Server as a managed instance in the cloud. And what this gives you as a developer is you don't have to make any changes if you move from on-prem SQL Server to SQL Database Managed Instance, because it's the same SQL Server. And you can use the same .NET sort of client libraries that you've had in the applications that you've been running. It's secure and compliant, so you still get all the benefits from an encryption perspective. And the service meets all the compliance standards when it comes to HIPAA, PCI. So as an organization, then you can start storing sensitive information in the service. And with the Azure hybrid benefits, you can also sort of leverage your existing investments in the SQL Server licensing model and move that over to SQL database managed instance. So this service that we have launched, and we've seen sort of strong adoption. We have about 2,000 plus customers sort of trying it out. And this is the most cost-effective way to move your applications from on-prem to the cloud. We've also added capabilities in SQL database called SQL Database Hyperscale, which allows you to scale up to 100 terabytes. And it does constant time performance for point-in-time restores and backups, so you can have about 100 terabyte backups and restores happening within 10 minutes. And the key benefit of this feature is scaling compute and storage independently. So depending on your data size, your storage is separate and your compute is separate. Kind of the same model that you saw with all the Hadoop services where compute and storage was separate. So that's kind of becoming an industry standard over here. And besides these investments, we've had in the last sort of year all these enhancements that have gone into Azure Data Services. The slide is just too small to fit everything, but the point over here is like we've sort of launched a lot of these innovations which are helping developers sort of make advances with their data stack in the cloud. And it's humbling to see how strong an adoption have we seen with all of these features in the cloud itself regarding SQL Server. Now, let's say you're starting building cloud-native applications in the cloud. One of the services that we have, which is very popular, is Azure Cosmos DB. It's a globally distributed, massively scalable, multi-model database service. And how to fit what it breaks down is it provides a layer where you can sort of build multiple NoSQL-like applications on the stack. So you have access to table APIs, you have access to Cassandra now, which is new, you have access to SQL, MongoDB, Gremlin. And so basically from a developer perspective, you can pick your favorite sort of open source API that you like, and you can start using it effortlessly in Azure Cosmos DB. And what Cosmos DB sort of gives you out of the box are sort of three core pillars, which is around partitioning, replication, and resource governance. That means from a partitioning perspective, you can elastically scale out compute and storage independently, so you can sort of minimize your cost of running the service in the cloud. And then from a replication perspective, the service replicates your data globally, and it's available instantly, so you can start building sort of globally distributed applications as well. And there is resource governance in terms of what are the throughput latencies, what are the guarantees that the service gives out of the box, so you can start sort of using this database in low latency scenarios as well. Few enhancements that are coming to the service is master replication. So now your writes are replicated to all the masters running globally with a guaranteed latency of less than 10 milliseconds. Cassandra API has been added to the stack. So earlier we had Tables API, we had MongoDB, SQL, and a few others, and Cassandra API has been added as well. And then there is enhanced SLAs on basically 5 nines on global read and writes, which is financially backed as well. And then more recently, what we've announced is we've announced a new pricing option that reduces cost up to 65% with Azure Reserve Capacity. So as a developer, if you want to get started, there is now a more economical way of getting started with the Azure Cosmos DB as well. So this is one of our new fastest growing services that we have seen in Azure from a data perspective. Then towards the end of sort of modernizing your data estate, it's all about unlocking insights. So once you have your data, it's all about what business decisions can you make, or can you help your business decision maker to sort of transform your own companies. And given that traditionally forms over data applications are now changing to sort of data which is augmented through logs, which captures the user interaction, data is getting augmented through control systems, data is getting augmented through streaming systems. You have sort of data coming in from all these sources, and you need sort of a platform that can allow you to ingest data at scale, store data at scale, and then do data prep, and then serve data at scale as well. And then from an Azure perspective, sort of what we offer to developers is these set of services which you can use to complete your modern data warehouse pattern. So you can start with Azure Data Factory, which has 70 plus connectors across data sources, which are Microsoft, non-Microsoft, which allows you to store your data in Azure Data Lake Store. And this is a storage service that we were sort of using internally as well, that we've sort of brought to market, which allows you to sort of store petabytes of data and access them in quite a short time. We also offer Azure Databricks, which provides the best of the Spark experience. So Spark is very popular in the analytical space around for data prep, data analysis. And what Databricks brings in over here is a very rich notebook interface, which you can sort of use to get easily started. There are guided tutorials on how you can go about writing your first Spark applications. And then once your data has been prepped, you can use Azure SQL Data Warehouse, which has been sort of recognized as the fastest cloud data warehouse by a benchmark done by GigaOM. And then once the data is sort of materialized into data marts, into tables, then you can sort of use Power BI to enable your business analysts to do self-service BI on top of the data that has been prepped up. So it's a fairly complicated process. There's a fairly complicated series of steps that a developer can take. But what they can rely on is from a cloud perspective, like Microsoft has provided all these services which take care of key concepts around reliability, scalability, and deploying in a secure manner in enterprise manner, so that you can sort of start using these services very, very quickly. Another service that we have launched is Azure Data Explorer. So this is a service that we're using internally as well. And what this service allows you to do is to do query at massive scale. So you can query 1 billion records in under 1 second, and you can query data which is stored in all sort of data formats, be it JSON, Parquet, or etc. And then the beauty of the service is you can start simple, and it has a pay-as-you-go model. So if you want to start processing lots of data, then you can sort of scale as well to process that data. We also offer a broad spectrum of open source innovation. So what we are running over here is Azure HDInsight, which provides Hadoop and Spark and other open source projects coming from the Apache ecosystem as a managed service. And more recently, what we announced with HDInsight is availability of Hadoop 3.0. So Hadoop 3.0 is a major rev of the Hadoop framework, which sort of does an increase of the major version across all the frameworks, which sort of brings you asset semantics now to Hadoop, so you can have transactional capabilities that are coming into Hadoop. And then we've added sort of enterprise-grade securities, which means that you can deploy a Hadoop cluster within your virtual network. You can domain join your Hadoop cluster, so that means now developers can use their corporate credentials to log into your Hadoop cluster. IT admins can define policies that get applied to the Hadoop cluster as well. And then there is enhanced productivity toolsets that we have enabled, like we have enabled plugins in IntelliJ for Java and Visual Studio, which allow you to sort of debug your Hadoop applications as well. So I covered a lot over here from an Azure data perspective, but the key sort of themes over here were around you can start with your investments on-prem, and with the introduction of SQL Server 2019, it's an attempt to sort of break the data silos, where now you can run both Spark and SQL in the same cluster. You can access data stored in SQL or HDFS. You can start modernizing your on-prem applications to cloud by leveraging the data services around Postgres, MySQL, and also using Azure SQL Managed Instance, which requires you to make no app changes if you move to the cloud. You can start with Azure Cosmos DB if you're building cloud-native applications. It's a multi-model service, so that allows you to do SQL APIs, Gremlin APIs, MongoDB APIs, Cassandra APIs, and it does the scale-out behind the covers. And once you're sort of done, putting your data in all these data services, then you can start unlocking insights by building the modern data warehouse architecture as part of your applications. So, data and AI. is interesting. And we saw a little bit about the complexities that they're there for sort of getting your data in shape and into your data lake. The next step sort of that comes is basically, you have your data, but like, what do you do as a developer? Like, what do you do next? Like, do you just look at the data? And then what sort of we have done from a Microsoft perspective is we've sort of empowered developers all along. That has been our strength, like starting with Visual Studio. We've sort of made experiences that have made developers more productive. And over the last couple of years, the investments that we have done with cognitive services has put us sort of front and center in the space as well, where now we have about 1 million developers using cognitive services, about 300K developers using the bot service to build conversational experiences. And developers are using these services to deploy these models like on-prem or in the cloud or on the edge. And then Microsoft itself is investing billions and billions in terms of improving their algorithms using Bing. We've also sort of infused AI across all of our products. So if you are using Office and PowerPoint, like if you drag and drop an image, that gives you design ideas and stuff. So all around, sort of, we've been innovating ourselves to improve our own algorithms, and we've been offering these algos as sort of pre-trained models using cognitive services, which from a developer perspective provides sort of an easy way to start infusing AI into your applications. The way we think about the AI journey from a developer or a non-data science perspective is the following. Our goal is simple. Like, we want to sort of empower organizations to use AI throughout their company. So that could sort of means these three high-level steps. We want to make sure that you can bring AI to every application, you can bring AI to every process, and you can bring AI to every employee. So let's look at how you can sort of bring AI to every applications. The first thing sort of a developer can do is you can use pre-built AI services. So you have to rethink how applications are written today, like the forms over data applications. How do you do recommendations? How do you forecasting? How do you do sentiment analysis? So these pre-trained models with cognitive services allow you to do vision, like speech, language, and knowledge. And once you've sort of started infusing AI into your applications, the second thing to sort of think about is what experiences do you build? Traditionally, our experiences have been, inputting data on websites or in sort of desktop applications or through phones, but natural language processing is taking up. So conversational interactions are becoming much more important. Like, almost each and every company will have a digital assistant going forward, which needs to be themed, it needs to match the corporate branding. So how do you go about sort of building these experiences? And combined with cognitive services and bot service, you can start sort of infusing AI into your applications and building a conversational platform on top of it. Here are some examples of customers who are using cognitive services and building a conversational platform. NBA is using cognitive services in their website. BMW is sort of using the conversational bot platform to add the chatbot capability in their digital car assistant. And we've been using sort of AI throughout Microsoft. These are some examples of product teams using AI. There's Microsoft 365, Windows, Dynamics, Skype, Bing, and HoloLens. And here are some examples of how we've been sort of using AI ourselves. In PowerPoint, we've added smarts. So if you add in PowerPoint dates in 4 rows, then it sort of will auto format the slide, so you have a visual representation of the dates. In Excel, if you go to charts and say recommend me charts, that's sort of powered by AI that we've built. In Word, so dictation and read around. So we've sort of spent a lot of our efforts in refining these models, and we've learned a lot. And that's what we are using to sort of bring these services to the market, because running AI at scale is hard, and sort of customizing these models and fine-tuning these models is hard. And so our mission is basically to make sure that you can consume these these AI services easily in the cloud. And what we have to offer from an AI perspective are sort of 3 sets of big high-level services. One set of services are targeting AI apps and agents. So these are services around pre-built models that you can use. So cognitive services is an example of services that you can have. And bot service, example of a service which you can use to build conversational or chatbot-like scenarios. You can use cognitive search to do knowledge mining to see what the graph looks like so you can query it better. And then on the right, we have our machine learning set of services which a data scientist can use to sort of build custom models. So they can use Azure Databricks, Azure Machine Learning, which is a fantastic framework for deploying models, and then the Azure AI infrastructure in terms of what hardware is available for you to sort of train your models on. From a developer perspective, and especially for the .NET community, we've also introduced a machine learning framework called ML.NET. So it's a machine learning framework built for .NET developers, so that .NET developers can build custom machine learning models, and they can deploy these models as part of their applications. And these ML.NET has been, it's proven to run at scale because it's being used internally in Azure and Microsoft, in Office and Windows. And the example I showed you for PowerPoint is basically using ML.NET. So it's a machine learning framework that we've battle tested ourselves. It's extensible. So you can use models that were built using TensorFlow, Onyx, and Info.NET. So the idea over here is like, if you're building in your team, you have data science expertise, and they're using some of these popular open source frameworks like TensorFlow. You can take these models and you can use ML.NET to consume those models in your applications. It's cross-platform and open source, so you can sort of run it anywhere. You can run it on-prem, you can run it in the cloud, it deploys app locally, you can run it on the edge, you can check in the models, and you can use the same CI/CD process that you have for your entire application. So it's literally a DLL in your application. And it comes with a set of tools. So it comes with a tool set that we're working on which allow you to sort of build a model as well, that you can sort of use the tool to generate code for both for training and consumption. This is a C# code that you can get to include in your application. So you can try ML.NET right now. It's in preview. We are at 0.7, and we've sort of enabled these common developer scenarios around, I want to do sentiment analysis, I want to do classification, I want to do recommendation, I want to do sales forecasting, and so on. From a whole stack perspective, what machine learning has to offer in Azure is this set of pre-trained models which you saw around cognitive services. You can also use popular frameworks like PyTorch, TensorFlow, Keras, and Onyx. You can use one of these services around Databricks, machine learning, and sort of machine learning VMs. So these services are optimized for a persona who sort of a data scientist. And then you can sort of run these models on either CPUs, GPUs, or sort of FPGAs. And then you can deploy these models either on-prem or in the cloud or on the edge. And behind the scenes, our services will sort of manage the models for you. So Azure Machine Learning provides machine learning as a service. So it has a Python SDK that you can use to sort of deploy models. And then it has Azure Notebooks as an interface that you can use to build the models as well. From a deep learning perspective, sort of what we've worked with the community over large is you have all these popular open source projects available around TensorFlow, PyTorch, Scikit-learn, MXNet, Keras. And then what we've worked with the community is to come up with an open source standard called Onyx, so where you can build these models in any of these open source frameworks, and you can deploy the model in an Onyx format so it can be consumed by any other application as well. An innovation that we're coming up in the machine learning space is around this notion called automated machine learning. And so a very good example of how to think about automated machine learning is, let's say you have a problem. You have to build a model which is going to predict the price of the car. And the way to go about from a data science perspective is you have to think about what features are important. Like, is the model of the car important? Is the year of the car important? Which algorithm should I use? There are about 10 to 20 algos that can apply to this problem. And how should I fine-tune those parameters? So there are a lot of complexities, even from a data science perspective, that a data scientist has to go through. And so what AutoML sort of does is basically it accelerates model development. And what it does behind the scenes is, given a business problem and given a set of data, it sort of goes through a permutation and combinations of different models with different settings, and it comes up with a recommendation of a model with some parameters which has the sort of best performance. And this becomes very, very interesting, especially when you tie in Azure, because you can do your training in the cloud, and then you can come back with a result that you can sort of start using in your application as well. And this is also smart AutoML. This is not like a brute force AutoML, which goes through an exhaustive approach across all the models and all the settings. So there's some smarts built in, like depending on your data and what problem you're trying to solve, it can sort of not run through all the algos as well. So there's some smarts built in. And again, this is technology that we've been sort of using ourselves internally that now we are sort of bringing into market. And we believe that with this, at least it gives data scientists something in their arsenal to automate this boring task of trying out like 4 or 5 different models with different settings and seeing how performance compares over time. And then sort of you can leverage Azure and deploy all these models on CPUs or GPUs or sort of FPGAs as well. And then you can complete your entire CI/CD loop from a model operationalization perspective. So Azure Machine Learning allows you to sort of train and deploy models across all these form factors. And then behind the scenes, it has telemetry built in, which allows you to track how model performance is doing over time. And then you can sort of manage these models into production. The second step of sort of bringing AI to everyone is around bringing AI to every business process as well. And there are 2 kinds of processes that exist. There are sort of vertical processes around fleet optimization or a certain vertical, and there are horizontal processes around how does my HR system work? How can I infuse AI into my HR process? And what Microsoft has to offer is in this space with Dynamics 365, it offers you this SaaS-based model where you have Dynamics 365 for sales, for talent, that you can start using out of the box. And if you want to customize these models, then you can use our AI platform to build custom models that you can start deploying and consuming within these applications as well. And here are some examples of customers sort of using this stack. So Quartersport is a startup online lender which does risk management. And by leveraging Microsoft AI platform, they were able to increase the borrow rate by 15% and decrease the default rate by 85%. Blue Metal was working with a healthcare company to optimize how much time does the patient spend. So they were predicting that time, and they were able to sort of efficiently manage the scheduling system for that company. And so far, sort of, I've talked about AI from a developer perspective or from a tech perspective. And what also remains in terms of completing our mission to bring AI to each and every employee is also we want to enable that as a non-data scientist or as a non-software developer, you can still use AI in your application as well. So our goal is to make sure that AI is accessible to each and every employee. And the way we'll sort of go about is, now we want to make sure that you can sort of drive chaos from knowledge. We want to make sure that we democratize the AI experience so it's easily available to you in a manner that makes sense. And then it's self-service. So you no longer have to sort of rely on sort of business IT or sort of DBAs to get access to the data. You have access to the data. It's all sort of audited. It's all in a compliant manner. So you can only access what you have. And one of the services that we have in this space is around PowerBI, which allows you to sort of access any data anywhere. And the whole beauty of PowerBI is that you can build these dashboards in real time that you can sort of deploy on the web, on mobile. You can also sort of use it in Excel. You can embed these dashboards in PowerPoint presentations as well. And it sort of brings you the best of data that's born in the cloud and data that's sort of born on-prem as well, and offers you in a rich interface from a business analyst perspective. The key challenges that exist in the space is around getting access to insights quickly. So you don't want to be in a situation where sort of you're infusing AI and sort of takes you a day to get insights. You want insights quickly. So you want to be able to run these models by leveraging data that you have. So this is both the data that you've sort of modernized at your data estate, and this data which from a business perspective, what business entities do you have, and how can you sort of apply ML to those business entities itself. And today it's a fairly complex system that you have to sort of integrate both your data estate for the actual data, and then you have to integrate your contextual knowledge of what this data means from a business perspective, and how would you go about sort of adding value to it. The way sort of Microsoft is going about is we want to make sure that access to insights happens with no cliffs. And there are different sort of personas over here. From a business and user perspective, using Power BI, you can easily discover and explore insights with AI in minutes. You can sort of apply the Azure Cognitive Services, or you can apply models that were built using your data science team. And from a business analyst perspective, you can easily do scenarios like recommendation or sentiment analysis by exploring your data in Power BI using Power Query, and then you can sort of add insights to that data sets effectively. From a BI Pro perspective, you can self-service ML, and then from a data science perspective, you can use the Azure AI platform to build custom models that you can deploy using Azure ML. And then from a business analyst perspective, all you have to do is just consume those models as part of your data exploration. And all these four scenarios sort of sit on your data lake. So this is data lake which you've built up with the data that you have, that you've sort of combined in your digital loop from customers, products, employees, and operations, and which is data which is augmented with your business knowledge as well, in terms of what do these entities mean, and what's your sort of business outlook on the actual data itself. So you have access to this whole entire data lake across all your business analysts. And what we're enabling from a Power BI perspective in the space is around, from an end user perspective, how do I explore this data? Like today, sort of we've provided you with a drag and drop experience that you can use in the web or as a desktop client. Tomorrow, you can also sort of use natural language processing, so you can have a conversational in this experience where you can ask questions like, what does my sales forecast look like, or what was the sentiment of the user that stayed in my hotel. You can start using these cognitive services out of the box as well. So imagine an experience where you are in Power BI, and this sort of you pull in your data from SQL Server, and as you're exploring your comments table, you can right-click and say, add sentiment analysis, and it's going to sort of run a sentiment analysis model that was built in cognitive services. Or you can do OCR, you can do text translation, you can do key phrase extraction, and there are a lot more scenarios that you can do from an end user perspective. You can also bring in your data and sort of do lightweight data prep as well with R and Python. So there is code integration as well, if you have expertise in that space as well. And then you can also use AutoML as part of a BI professional. So imagine a scenario where you have you want to do sales forecasting. So you've pulled in your sales data, and then you have a turnkey option of saying right-click, add sales forecasting, which is going to apply this model and give you a forecast based on the time series that you sort of selected. And this is the same AutoML that I sort of talked about earlier when I was talking about the Azure AI platform. And the idea over here is like, this is expertise that we've built up, that we are bringing it to market and enabling for all kinds of developers. So there's a developer-focused approach where you can consume this data. There's a data science-specific approach where you can consume AutoML. And this is the BI-focused approach where you can consume AutoML as part of your BI workflow as well. And then lastly, there's custom AI. So if you have an organization which has data science expertise, then they can build custom models, which you can easily incorporate into your flow as well. So the same experience that you had for AutoML, now you can have with Power Query as well, where you bring in your data and you can run a custom machine learning model which was built in Azure Machine Learning, and you can use it in Power BI as well. So the idea over here is really to sort of democratize AI for each and every employee, so that it's available, and then employees can use it to sort of transform their own businesses. And the last sort of step was in our mission of AI was around empowering people to transform society as well. And our approach around it is effectively to make sure that we're building responsible AI and trusted AI. So this is an effort that we sort of deeply believe in, and we started various efforts around it. There's an ethics sort of group that we have started as well. And the key thing over here is like, how do you ensure that your AI is responsible in the sense, how do you ensure that there's no bias? There's no bias in the model, there's no bias in the data. How do you inform the user that there was bias in the model that they're trying to run? So there are all these kinds of efforts which sort of span across all these developer personas as well that we are sort of investing in from a Microsoft perspective as well. And so, I've talked to you a lot about our entire AI platform, and I wanted to show you this video just to sort of encourage you on the possibilities that exist with AI, and sort of interested to see what you'll sort of come up with as well.
Artificial intelligence isn't coming, it's here. It's the defining technology of our time. But it's human ingenuity that makes it so powerful. Jane started losing her vision when she was 12.
California Street.
She uses Seeing AI.
I crept down the
stairs and out the door,
which enables her to read and navigate her world. Microsoft AI is helping farmers adapt to climate change.
We can use technology to help feed the world without wrecking the planet.
Enabling wildlife conservation.
The ability to use AI really democratizes science. WildMe uses images from any source to help study endangered species.
And creating new ways for people with hearing loss to communicate.
I want the exact same information that my hearing friends have.
It's more than just imitating intelligence or sounding like a human. Microsoft AI is changing every industry, from healthcare.
And now you can see these finite details, the relationship with many structures,
to engineering and telecommunications.
We are using artificial intelligence to change the way we are relating to customers.
AI lets us put people first.
The Microsoft tools really enabled us to breathe digital life into an iconic brand persona.
The product that we make is not a thing in a box.
No.
Microsoft AI empowers others to create experiences and potential. This is just the beginning.
Artificial intelligence, it's just opened up this whole world.
The future we invent is a choice we make.
So with that, I'm very excited to see what sort of you will build with the Microsoft AI platform. Again, thank you so much for coming so early in the morning. If you have any questions, hope this was useful. If you have any questions, I'll be over here and sort of hanging around, more than happy to chat with everybody sort of over here. But thank you, and have a sort of a great conference for this week.